Good evening, my name is Marcin Czasnek and welcome to Flash News. We start with the tense situation on the eastern flank of the European Union and NATO. Close to Polish border, the large Russian-Belarusian maneuvers Zapad 2021 are taking place. In Riga today, the heads of diplomacy and ministers of defense of Poland, Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia discussed the security of the region.
Silver Arrow. This is the code name for the international exercises that have been conducted for almost 2 weeks in Latvia. The Polish 17th Mechanized Brigade is also participating. We took part in the live firing exercise as part of cooperation. For us, this is an invaluable experience, both tactically and combat-wise. An exercise abroad always provides a great opportunity to test the rapid deployment of troops and hone alliance procedures. Soldiers improve their skills by exercising together, and in this way they show that the countries of our part in Europe, on the eastern flank of NATO, are in solidarity with each other. This year's NATO exercises coincide with the huge Zapad maneuvers across the eastern border. Russia and Belarus are exercising at 14 training grounds. The Russians want above all to demonstrate what great, modern, capable troops they have, and that the West should be afraid, because if anything happens, the West will lose. Security in the region was the main topic of the meeting of national defense ministers and heads of diplomacy of Poland, Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia in Riga. We face the same challenges and threats, so trying to build a joint response to them is more than natural. The situation on the eastern flank is constantly monitored by NATO. The alliance has also had 4 multinational battalion battle groups here for several years. The Latvian battalion, commanded by Canadians, includes Poles. The exercise that is taking place here is to test and completely integrate all nationalities, of which there are 10. The 9th shift of the Polish contingent consists of approximately 200 soldiers. They have PT-91 Twardy tanks in the mission area.
Attempts to set up a new migration route through Poland continuing. At the weekend alone, the border guard thwarted over 500 attempts to illegally cross the Polish border. Interestingly, Polish law enforcement are also increasingly frequently apprehending members of criminal groups organizing the smuggling of people.
It almost always takes place at night. Groups of a dozen to several dozen people are instructed by the smuggling mafias how to get to Poland. After illegally crossing the border and already in Poland, other people are supposed to wait for them, who will take care of the next part. For some of the illegal immigrants, the first destination is supposedly Warsaw. Next, there is a series of other hideouts, then the German border and finally other Western European countries. In the last 24 hours alone, the border guard has detained 8 foreigners who assisted in such smuggling. These include citizens of Syria legally residing in Germany or Belgium. This is a further proof that criminal rings who make money from people trafficking are now trying to set up a new route for the smuggling of migrants, which will pass right through Poland. The whole operation no longer entails casual groups of migrants, but as organized crime. They contact illegal immigrants, among other things, through social networks and various groups, and they are making contacts. These people would have been briefed. The helpers come to the border who know exactly where to come. This is why the Polish government has imposed state of emergency at the border with Belarus. Certainly our borders are secure. In particular, I'm referring to the borders with Belarus, although of course we also protect the border with the Kaliningrad region. Most of the migrants detained at the Polish border in recent days are Iraqi nationals. The EU agency Frontex expects that migrants smuggled into Europe may soon start claiming to be Afghans in order to seek asylum.
The Baltic pipe is coming ashore and all signs point to the blue fuel flowing to Poland in just over a year's time. This is one of the most strategic investments in which Poland is involved.
These are pictures of the so-called landing of Baltic pipe. This is the lingo for the moment when an undersea pipeline comes ashore, in this case from the Baltic. The operation to pull the gas pipeline ashore from the Polish side under the beach in a pre-drilled tunnel has come to an end. A similar pull-out operation on the Danish side is planned for October. And then gas from the Norwegian shelf is to flow across the Baltic to Poland. Its launch will open another chapter in the diversification of gas supplies, Piotr Naimski emphasized. Secure gas supplies to Poland will be ensured, and they will be ensured in the long term, both in terms of origin and quantities. At the end of the next year, the current long-term contract with Gazprom will expire. The Polish authorities have decided not to renew it. For some time during this agreement, due to its provisions, Poland paid for gas the highest rates in Europe, and it was a big burden for our economy. The withdrawal from gas supplies from Gazprom strengthens Poland's energy security. The Baltic Pipe, the expansion of the Świnoujście gas terminal, and the supply of gas from the United States were the alternatives. As a token of closer cooperation, the US Secretary of Energy will come to Warsaw next week. According to estimates, consumption of blue fuel will increase by 50% after 2030. Among other things, gas will replace coal, the consumption of which will gradually come down as Poland is embarking on energy transformation.
Unvaccinated people are 11 times more likely to die from COVID-19 and 10 times more likely to be hospitalized for the infection than vaccinated people. These are the results of the large study published by the US CDC agency.
This is further solid evidence of the effectiveness of coronavirus vaccination. Researchers from the US Center for Disease Control and Prevention collected data on infections, hospitalizations and deaths over several months. The conclusions?
Those who were unvaccinated were about 4.5 times more likely to get COVID-19, over 10 times more likely to be hospitalized, and 11 times more likely to die from the disease.
More than 90% of the hospital admissions and deaths recorded during that time were in unvaccinated people. The situation is also similar in other countries, including Poland. These data confirm what we observe among COVID-19 hospitalized patients. If someone is struggling with severe complications, severe course of the disease, or passes away because of COVID-19, the chances are 9 out of 10 that he or she is unvaccinated. New infections are going up steadily by more than half every week. It must be said very clearly that the fourth wave is inevitable. In fact, it has arrived. The US health authorities recommend that children be vaccinated. In Poland, vaccination in schools is due to start this week. Children can get vaccinated both at school in a mobile vaccination center, or if they don't want to, they can go to a vaccination center next door and get vaccinated there. Children with individual education schedule, because they're ill, can be even vaccinated at home. It is important, especially since the Delta mutation, which is dominant in Poland, is more dangerous for younger patients. Children are starting to get sick. We already have data from the United States that a quarter of patients in hospital in the States, thousands of them are children. As of today, about 30% of children over the age of 12 in Poland have been vaccinated.
The papal visit to Slovakia continues. Among other things, Francis met with representatives of the government, society, diplomatic corps and Slovak clergy.
I have come as a pilgrim to a young country with centuries of history, to a land with deep roots struck at the heart of Europe, the Pope said. The official welcoming ceremony took place at the presidential palace in Bratislava. In the palace gardens, Francis met with politicians and representatives of Slovak social life. He encouraged them to promote peace, brotherhood based on Christian roots, justice and solidarity, and to cherish the beauty of being together. The first commercial flight to Kabul since the Taliban took power in Afghanistan. A plane from Pakistani airline PIA arrived there with several people on board. A spokesman for the airline announced the restoration of a permanent connection between Kabul and Islamabad. He also said more than a dozen humanitarian organizations and many journalists had asked the Pakistani airline to take them from Kabul. A brutal attack in Rimini, Italy. An asylum seeker from Somalia first pulled out a knife on a bus and wounded 2 female ticket inspectors who wanted to see his ticket. Then he fled the vehicle and injured another 3 people, including a 6-year-old boy who was sitting with his mother in front of a stall. Investigators suspect that 26-year-old attacker was under the influence of drugs. Residents of Logansport, Indiana, USA have received the body of Humberto Sanchez with honors. The 22-year-old soldier was among 13 people who died in a terrorist attack in Kabul. The funeral procession drove through the streets of the city and crowds with American flags lined the streets. Motorcycles paid tribute to the hero as well as pilots who flew over the fallen soldier's hometown.
The Polish Institute of National Remembrance undergoes a digital revolution. It wants to reach as many people as possible with the help of multimedia. And this is what its newly established department has been tasked to do.
What has so far been hidden in the files of the archives of the Institute of National Remembrance will now go on show thanks to the recently established Department of New Technologies. The mission of the New Technologies Department is to drive forward digital transformation. Our overarching objective is to transfer all knowledge and research programs onto web platforms and into mobile applications. This is a recipe for communicating history in a modern form. The project will use the latest IT technologies in a language that is more palatable for young generations. This is one of the essential missions of the Institute of National Remembrance. Because we live in times where moral justice is no longer enough, we must offer education to those who are interested in history. All the projects will be made available online. The Institute of National Remembrance is also planning theatre lectures and daycare education. The premiere of the Heroes of Independence multimedia project is a foretaste of what the newly established department will offer in the future. A series of cartoon films show the heroism of people who have contributed to the Polish idea of independence. We address 3 target groups: young people aged 10+, who are our largest target group. The second group is young people interested in history, and the third group is all the computer game enthusiasts. The cartoons tell the story of forgotten heroes of the most important events in Polish history in a modern way. The prepared projects will help to conduct innovative history lessons. New technology zones will also be set up in institute's branches.
A visionary, a genius, a philosopher and an imaginative writer who put onto paper what seemed impossible and unreal. 100 years ago, Stanisław Lem was born in Lviv. His books Eden, Return from the Stars and Solaris are still among the most important works of science fiction literature in the world.
Designation 3836, one of the 700,000 known asteroids in the belt between Mars and Jupiter. It orbits 150 million kilometers from the Earth, which is basically equidistant to the Sun. This is the Lem asteroid. It was discovered in 1979. It is a tribute from the world of astronomy to the man who brought people closer to the stars than any other writer in history. This is precisely one of the Lem's greatest legacies, namely the understanding of sci-fi as a genre that tries to answer questions today that will only be asked tomorrow. In his time, when he published Astronauts, Eden, Return from the Stars and other descriptions of fantastic worlds and also of humanity's inventions, they were pure fantasy. Books were crystals with fixed content. They could be read with an opton. It was even similar to a book, but with one and only one page between the covers. At a touch, more pages of text would appear on it. Today we use the fantastic objects from Lem's novel in our everyday lives.
Spełniło się tego bardzo dużo.
A lot of it has come true because we use 3D printers and audiobooks, virtual reality and internet and phantomatics. In addition, he put his finger on the greatest pains of mankind. He asked questions with only implicit answers. His Solaris, a masterpiece of sci-fi literature, is also a poignant study of humanity. Not only is Stanisław Lem the most outstanding Polish representative of science fiction, but also an outstanding writer, an outstanding thinker, an outstanding philosopher and a futurologist known all over the world. A man of great format with broad horizons and unusual taste. And of unlimited wisdom. As he used to say, be of good cheer because there is no reason to be of bad cheer.
If anyone is going to Paris and would like to see the Arc de Triomphe, should hurry. The monument will be wrapped in tarpaulin for some time. And this is not about conservation work, but the realization of an artistic vision.
The 50-meter-high monument in Charles de Gaulle Square disappeared under a silver and blue tarpaulin. It was the idea of Christer, an artist of Bulgarian origin who lived in New York and Paris. In the French capital, he lived near the Champs-Élysées and experimented with covering various objects with textiles and rope. His dream was precisely to wrap the Arc de Triomphe. The artist died last year. Christer's concept was brought to life by his nephew. The installation can be seen until the 3rd of October. About 10,000 people protested in Amsterdam against the overpriced housing market. They demonstrate their anger and indignation at the rising prices of renting and buying flats and the lack of social housing. The last protest that addressed the lack of housing availability in the Netherlands took place in the 1980s. There is a shortage of around 300,000 units across the country. More protests have already been announced. The world's largest installation for capturing carbon dioxide from the air was launched in Iceland. It is called Orca. The installation was created by a Swiss company specializing in the construction of similar devices. Orca will be able to extract 4,000 tons of carbon dioxide from the air every year. The greenhouse gas will then be injected underground. The technology is expected to help reduce carbon dioxide emissions. What a thrill it was in Miami Gardens, Florida, during a college football game. A calf caught everyone's attention. The animal fell out of the upper grandstand and desperately held on with its paw to save itself from falling. Students quickly unfurled an American flag which cushioned the landing. The action was a success and the stands went wild with joy, rewarding the rescuers with an ovation.
Wonderful reaction and fantastic happy end. That's all for today. Thank you for watching and have a good night.